Hello everyone, welcome back to Communications Vlogs. I'm Jared Rafson, and today I will be discussing the Week 6 reading, both Reading Pop Culture and the Rhetorical Act. I'm going to start with the Reading Pop Culture reading. We had 4 essays this week, and this week's Reading Pop Culture reading was all about television and what kind of influence it has on us as Americans. Since the popularization of television in the 1960s, nothing else has had more influence on American pop culture, and these 4 reading pop culture essays boasted a variety of arguments on different aspects of television and how they contribute to American pop culture. Firstly, I'm going to discuss the article "Television Addiction is No Mere Metaphor" by Robert Kuby and a man whose first name is Mihaly and his last name is Eastern European, and I unfortunately cannot pronounce. And the points they make in this article are that most of America is glued to their television set. It's hard for us to turn our TVs off, and he talked about how families that attempt to give up television, whether voluntarily or through like a sponsored experiment, like see if your family can ditch TV for a week, often suffer negative consequences as a result. They suffer from increased anxiety, and like animosity towards each other, members of the family, and they often fight more as a result. It's like something that's been taken out of their lives, an essential piece, and the family ends up falling apart, and they go back on the band, and they end up not being able to make it. And that actually happens a lot. It just goes to show you how addicted we are to our TVs as Americans. And he also states how worse the problem is today with the advent of cell phones. I mean, it's like having a portable television that you can just carry around in your pocket. And having a piece of technology with you at all times just makes you more susceptible to becoming addicted to it, because you can just pull it out and just be on it all the time. And I see this in class too. People just can't be off their phones. They have to have them on their desks, and they have to check them during class. And some teachers will let it happen, some teachers will get mad, but it just shows you the way of the world. The next article was Girls, Girls, Girls by Roxane Gay, and this article was all about the hit HBO series Girls, written by Lena Dunham. And the author, Roxane Gay, criticized certain stereotypes that burden the show. She liked what it was trying to do. The show revolves around a woman in her 20s and her kind of circle of friends who just are kind of like them navigating, men and life and stuff all together. And like I said, she liked the show and what it was trying to do, but it said it kind of had a certain, there was a few stereotypes, especially around, people of color, the cast is mostly white, and just a couple stereotypes about women in general. But she liked what it was trying to do, and she hopes that in the future we can have more shows that have female protagonists that aren't super sexy or super anything, just normal people, and that's what this show does. It shows normal people just going through normal life, and she hopes that we can have more shows like that in the future. The next article I wanted to discuss was the apocalyptic strain in popular culture, the American Nightmare the American Nightmare Becomes the American Dream by Paul A. Cantor. And this article was all about how shows such as the AMC's The Walking Dead and an older one called Falling Skies have this apocalypse theme, and how these shows show the human psyche being tested to the limit, and by showing humans what could happen when the world as we know it ends. And it shows people after the apocalypse just trying to survive, and how the American dream falls apart, and it's just back to the roots. It's like the colonists here. You have to live off the land and survive, and it tests the human mind to the limit. And in a way, it shows the rebuilding of the American dream. Like in The Walking Dead, you have to fend for yourself, and you have to live off the land. You have to fight off the zombies and protect your family. But you can survive, and you can be happy. But you just have to take precautions, because it's the end of the world. There's also a theme of survival recurring in these shows. It's kill or be killed. And it's got a very pioneer theme. Shows like these. And the last point he made in this article that I found fascinating was that the apocalypse theme is just a modern reimagining of the old westerns that were so popular in the 50s and 60s. They were called spaghetti westerns. They were filmed in Italy, but take place here in the U.S. and the American West. And he said the modern apocalypse theme is just a modern reimagining of the Western theme for our generation. I found that fascinating. It actually has some truth to that. Lastly, the last reading pop culture article I wanted to talk about was Netflix and the Future of Television by Ken Auletta. And this last article talked about the the competition of Netflix and Blockbuster. When Netflix was first coming around, they weren't sure that they would succeed. Blockbuster was really popular. You would go and you would go and you rent your movie and you would take it home and then you bring it back within a few days. And then no one had really heard of a mail order DVD service, and the market was kind of unsure. Netflix wasn't sure that they would succeed, and Netflix even talked about like, hey, like, could we become part of you? We could be your like mail order service. And Blockbuster was like, no. And then so Netflix started on their own. They weren't very successful at first, but then they started gaining traction very, very quickly in the early 2000s. And by the time Blockbuster started their own mail order service, it was too late. Netflix had gained millions of subscribers and was really gaining steam. And now it's the most popular streaming and rental service in the world. But it just goes to show you how Netflix, had the timing been a bit off, just as easily could have failed, and we could still have a Blockbuster today. So the world of business is really about timing, and even such a big company as Netflix could have easily failed had they timed this wrong. Now I'm going to talk about the rhetorical act reading, chapter 4. In this chapter, they went over the different types of evidence you can use to boost your rhetoric, and there were 5 main types. There was visual evidence, there was analogies, statistics, experts, and stories. The first one, visual evidence. Visual evidence is very powerful. You can use pictures, videos, to help boost your argument. If you're doing a presentation or any kind of persuasive speech, it's useful to have a slideshow that's going on behind you, and you can use those images to boost your argument. You don't want to rely on them too much, because people will start to focus on the images more than your speech and your rhetoric, but images can be a very powerful tool as like an add-on to help you boost your speech. The next one was analogies, making comparisons to other points you're making comparisons between two items. This can also be used to strengthen an argument. You can compare and contrast different things, make an analogy, connect things to the outside world. If you're doing a speech on one topic, it doesn't have to be just that topic. You can connect it to other things, and it'll give your argument more depth, and it'll connect it to the real world and ground it more. Next up is statistics, and statistical evidence. You can't get much more accurate than that. I mean, numbers don't lie. If you're doing a scientific or a mathematical report, you're trying to do a persuasive argument on either of those two things, you're going to need numbers, and statistics is an easy way to get those numbers that you need to boost your argument. And they're very often they're fact checked by scientists, and they're hard to swing. They're hard to be biased. So statistics are a very accurate tool you can use to boost your argument. Next was experts, and this goes in hand with statistics. Whenever you're reporting on something, you want to trust the experts. So using their evidence to boost your argument will really help your argument, because whenever you have an argument, it's good to have cold hard fact behind it. And if you get stuff right from the experts, you know it's going to be correct, and you know it's going to be a good backing for whatever you're saying. This is probably, the next one is stories, and it's probably the weakest form of evidence you can use, because personal experience, while yes, it may, like stories you may have or stories someone else has told you, yes, while it may have happened, but it's not really like fact, it's not really scientific fact. Stories kind of depend on what you're presenting about. They can be very useful, but they can also cause you to get off topic, so they should be used sparingly and when it's appropriate. Excuse me. The next thing chapter 4 talked about was definitional strategies, where there were 10 total in the chapter. The first was dictionary definition, which was straight to the point, a word-for-word definition that you can find in a dictionary. The next would be stipulative definition, which is defining something in like a personal matter or with a personal twist. So the definition is subject to bias. One example of this would be when you ask someone to define politics, like everyone's going to have a different answer. And then next is authoritative definition, which is a definition provided by an expert on the given subject, and you can usually trust those very much, those like scientific fact. The next would be a negative definition, which is defining something by listing what it is not. So for an example of that would be water is not a solid. The next would be an etymological definition, which is defining something using original sources. The next is an exemplar definition, which is defining something by using examples. Some examples of furniture are a bed, a chair, a couch. The next would be the contextual definition, which is defining something by tracing its usage throughout history. You can trace gunpowder's usage throughout history, and that's how you define it. It was first invented by the Chinese, and then it progressed to be as like a flash tactic, and then it was progressed through history. It was progressed and invented, and it was used on the battlefield, and now it's one of the best weapon systems. It powers almost all weapon systems we have. Next would be an analogical definition, which is defining by comparing the known with the unknown. And then there's the synonym definition, which is defining a word by listing other words that can be used interchangeably. So words that have the same definition. And then lastly, but not least, there was operational definition, which was defining something by describing its process or its procedures. That's what I learned in the week 6 reading, week 5, and this has been my week 5 vlog. Thank you.